Chagiga Daf test begins with a Mishnah and takes us all the way up to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah and the Gemara that follows discusses the intertwined topics of when are you allowed to bring a make-up carbon chagiga. If you missed the carbon chagiga on the first day of Yom Tov, when can you make it up? And it also includes the topic of when did you do something that can't be fixed. When is it called Ma'uvas Lo Yochol Liskon? And there are different opinions of the Tanaim and Amraim. What is called something which cannot be fixed? Now the Gemara will give the source for when you can make up the missed carbon chagiga, and the Machlokas Amraim on the topic of when are things allowed to be made up in general. So let's begin. The Mishnah says that somebody did not bring the carbon chagiga on the first day of Yom Tov can bring it the entire Yom Tov, including Shmini Atzeres. So if he's supposed to bring it on the first day of Pesach, he can bring it all 7 days of Pesach. Supposed to bring it on the first day of Sukkot, he could bring it all 7 days of Sukkot plus Shmini Atzeres, which is the 8th day, which is really a different Yom Tov. And we'll learn from Exeris Kasev that it is still available to have the carbon chagiga of Sukkot brought on it, even though it's a different Yom Tov. However, says the Mishnah, if the Yom Tov passes by and he did not bring any carbon, now the Yom Tov is over, it's too late, he no longer is able to bring it, and this is called Ma'uvas Lo Yochol Liskon. It is a debauchery that cannot be fixed. It's a problem that cannot be fixed, and it's a lack that cannot be counted. Now, the Gemara now gives other the Mishnah gives other Tanaim will have other explanations of the phrase Ma'uvas Lo Yochol Liskon v'chisaron lo yochol himanos. Rishon ben Manasseh says that refers to somebody who is physically together with a woman who is forbidden to him and they give birth to a mamzer. That mamzer exists in the world and no tshuva that he'll do will ever take it away. If he would have just stolen, whether it's Geneva or Gzela, he would be able to return what he stole. But here he cannot undo what he has created in the world. It is a problem that cannot be fixed. Rishon ben Yochai says you only use the term ma'uvas about something which was proper and then got broken. So it refers to a Talmid Chacham who went off the derech haTorah, who left it behind. Okay, the Gemara now begins. The Gemara wants to know what is the source of the halacha that you're allowed to make up a carbon chagiga that you missed, even on Shmini Atzeres, even though it's a different Yom Tov. So the Gemara gives two sources. First one is brought by Rabbi Yochanan of Rabbi Shmuel. It's from the word Atzeres. The word Atzeres is used for the last day of Pesach, and it's also used for Shmini Atzeres. Right? This is B'yom Hashvi Atzeres Yilachem for the last day of Pesach. So the word Atzeres links the two, and it shows just like the 7th day of Pesach can be used to make up the carbon chagiga, Shmini Atzeres can also be used to make up the carbon chagiga of Sukkot. So the Gemara says this has to be that it's an extra word. If it's not an extra word, you can ask questions on it. The rule is whenever you have a Gzeir Shav that links two things, but the word is not extra, if you have a reason to differentiate them, then you cannot learn from one to the other. Here we have very good reason to make differentiations between the last day of Pesach and the last day of Sukkot. Last day of Pesach has the same halacha as the days which come before it. The Shmini Atzeres has a very different halacha than the days that come before. There are 6 different halachos, 6 ways in which it is different than Sukkot itself. Says the Gemara, no, it is extra, and therefore you cannot ask a question on it. It's because you're shoved from an extra word. The reason it's extra is because the word Atzeres, the term Atzeres, is meant to teach us that there's an Isser Malacha. It says Atzor, stop from doing Malacha. But you don't need that pasuk to teach me that there's an Isser Malacha, because it says Lo Sasa Malacha. So the word Atzeres is extra, and therefore it's there to link the two and teach me that you are allowed to bring a makeup, a tashlumin, a fill-in, carbon chagiga if you missed it up until that point. That's the Gemara's first source. The Gemara's second source comes from a Brisa. The Brisa learns from the pasuk which says V'chag Oisem Oisai Chag LaHashem Shivas Yamim. So V'chag Oisem Oisai, you should celebrate it, keyword Oisai. That's on the first day of Yom Tov. Chag LaHashem Shivas Yamim should be 7 days. So which is it, the first day or 7 days? So it's to teach you that the main day is the first day, but you can make it up all 7 days of Yom Tov. Now the pasuk continues and it says Chukas Olam L'Dorosechem B'Chodesh HaShavita Chag Oso, in the 7th month. That's to teach you that even after Yom Tov is over, there is something you could do in the rest of the month. What's that? And that's Shmini Atzeres, which is the rest, which is not part of those 7 days, but it's further along the month. Now you may think, therefore, I could do it the entire month. That's from there again. We have the word Oisei, which says no, only in the original are you allowed to do it, and therefore we have a conflict between the term Oisei and the extension Shivas Yamim and the extension B'Chodesh HaShvi. And the way we work it out is that you're supposed to bring it on the first day. Any other day is Tashlumin, and you can add one more day after Yom Tov, but not more than that. And that's how we know that you can do Shmini Atzeres and not anything further than that. Okay, now the Gemara is Machlokas Amoraim. What is the nature of this tashlumin? If you're going to bring a makeup carbon chagiga, what is it? So according to Rav Yochanan, the mitzvah is on the first day. Anything else you do is a makeup. So if for some reason you were not obligated in the carbon on the first day, like for example somebody was blind or lame and couldn't walk and therefore he has putter, then he doesn't need to make it up. You only make up something which you were obligated to do and you did not do. Something which you were not obligated to do, the original chiyuv never existed and there's no reason to make it up. However, according to Chizkiah, it's understood, not Chizkiah, according to Rav Oishi, it's understood differently. Each day has its own independent chiyuv for the carbon chagiga, and therefore if you did not have an obligation the first day, but you do get an obligation later, you do have to do a carbon chagiga then. Each one is independent of the days that come before. It's not really a makeup, it's an independent day. Of course, you only have to do it once, so once you do it once, there's no additional chiyuv, but each one has its own source of chiyuv. So somebody who was lame or blind and therefore was not obligated in the midst of the first day, but then he was healed on Yom Tov, he then does have to bring it because now the new days have their own independent chiyuv. We're talking about as a kasha on Rav Yochanan. We're saying that according to Rav Yochanan, if he did not have an obligation the first day, it doesn't have to make it up. The Gemara says, I'll show you that Rav Yochanan does not hold away. Rav Yochanan holds that if you don't have an obligation, you do have to make it up anyway. Where is that? Let's from the halacha of the carbon that is brought by a nazir. A nazir who becomes tamei has to wait until the 7 days of Tumah are over. Once the 7 days of Tumah is over, he has to bring a carbon to atone for the fact that he became Tameh while he was a Nazir. Now, the 7 days of Tumah end when the sun sets on the 7th day. The Chiv carbon should begin then, but we don't bring carbonos at night. So we can't bring the carbon until the next day afterwards. Now, what happens if he becomes Tameh? He can't bring the carbon because a person who's Tameh cannot bring a carbon. That is, he becomes Tameh again on the 8th day. So, if he becomes Tameh on the 8th day, that means that the sun already rose on the 8th day. He definitely had an obligation to bring the carbon. The obligation exists. If he then becomes Tameh and he can't bring it, he had an obligation. He couldn't do it. He has to make it up. And therefore he'll have to bring 2 karbanos later, one for his new Tumah and one for his old Tumah. Rav Yochanan says, though, even if, what would happen if he became Tameh at night? So the obligation to bring the carbon begins from sundown, so it exists at night, but you can't bring a carbon at night because carbonos aren't brought at night. So says Rav Yochanan, he would have to bring another carbon anyway. So the Gemara understands, what does that mean? Is that even though he didn't really have a chiyuv, because the chiyuv doesn't begin until the morning, still he has to bring it anyway as a tashlumin. So you see that a makeup does exist at a time when a person couldn't really bring the carbon for other reasons, where he didn't really have the chiyuv yet. If that's true, so then a person who's blind on the first day of Yom Tov, or he's lame on the first day of Yom Tov, even though his chiyuv is not fulfillable because he doesn't have the mitzvah, he doesn't really have a chiyuv, so he should still have to make it up if he becomes healed. Meaning, even if we'll agree with Rav Yochanan's approach, even according to Rav Yochanan's approach, that all the other days are only make-up days for the first day, we should still say that he could make it up even if he didn't have a chiyuv the first day, because the chiyuv exists, he just wasn't able to do it. He wasn't really obligated because he's blind, he has a patur. So similarly, at nighttime, a person has a patur. He has no obligation to bring the carbon. Yet, Rav Yochanan says that he does have to make it up. If he becomes Tameh at night, since the Chiv existed, he just had a patur, he does have to make it up and bring another carbon for this Tumah. So, he should therefore say the same thing about somebody who's blind on the first day of Yom Tov. So the Gemara tries 2 answers. The Gemara's first answer is that Tumah is different. In the case where the person became Tameh, and that's why he was ultimately blocked from bringing the carbon, there he has to make up the carbon, even though he didn't really have a fillable chiyuv. He couldn't do the chiyuv because it was nighttime, and then he became Tameh, but Tumah is the type of blockage to filling an obligation you have to make up even if you didn't really have the obligation yet, even if you had a patur all along. And the reason is because we see a special halacha of makeups for a tamei person, and that's in the case of a Pesach Sheni, somebody who was tamei on Erev Pesach Rishon has to bring a Pesach Sheni carbon. You see there is a special halacha of makeups for a person who became tamei, which is greater than other forms of makeup. And therefore, in this case where the Nazir became tamei at night, even though he didn't really have an obligation upon him because it was nighttime and he was pater, still his tumah is make-upable. So Gemara says that that's only true according to the man who understands that Pesach Sheni is a makeup day for Pesach Rishon. That's not clear. That's a machlokes and Mesachas Pesachim, and there are many who hold that Pesach Sheni is a Yom Tov in and of itself. It's not a makeup day. If it's not a makeup day, you cannot learn anything about Hilchos makeup being special for Tumah from there. There is nothing special about Hilchos Tumah, and therefore we're back to our question. So Gemara says, okay, so I'll answer you differently. Rav Yochanan really holds that nighttime has full obligation. You can bring a carbon at night. There is no p'tur of nighttime. He holds that somebody brings a carbon at night fulfills the mitzvah. You're not supposed to bring a carbonis at night, fine, but we don't look at it as there's a p'tur at night. There's a full obligation at night. And therefore, if he becomes tamei at night, the obligation already exists on him, even though he can't bring it, it exists on him, and he has to make it up. Not so, somebody who's blind or lame on the first day of Yom Tov has no obligation to bring the Karban Chagiga. He's considered pater entirely on a much greater level of Torah than somebody who is at night, and therefore can't bring the Karban at night. Okay, says the Gemara, that's fine. Assuming that you hold that Rav Yochanan holds that nighttime is the time when a person could bring a karbonos, and there is a chiv and there's no p'tur at night. But I will show you that that is not the case. I'll show you that that's not the case from the case of a zav. The halacha is that a zav, when he finishes his 7 days of ziva, he has an obligation to bring a carbon as well. If he starts to see another flow of ziva on day number 8, when he has his obligation to bring a carbon, of course, it's canceled. He can't bring a carbon. He becomes tamei. Now, the zav becomes tamei when he sees 3 flows within a certain time span. So the 3 flows are what make him tamei. Now, what happens if he sees all 3 flows on the day, on the 8th day? So then he becomes tamei. His obligation of tumah hit, because as soon as the sun rose, he was able to bring his carbon. That is, his obligation to bring a carbon already began. He becomes tamei from the 3 flows, and now he has to do a makeup, just like we said about the nazir. Now, what happens if he saw the tumah at night? So if he saw all 3 flows at night, so then he would not have to bring a makeup, because he never had a situation in which he was able to bring a carbon, because he couldn't bring it at night. Now, what happens if he sees 1 flow at night and 2 flows during the day? So the Gemara says, when the 1 flow at night, you may not count, because maybe it's just keri, maybe it's not ziva. But when you see 2 more during the day, then you see that all 3 do count, and therefore he was tamei the entire time. It's considered like the tumah started at night. He doesn't have to make anything up. If he sees 2 flows at night and 1 during the day, he definitely started his tumah before he ever had an obligation to bring a carbon, and he doesn't need to make anything up. Now, Rav Yochanan disagrees with one halacha. He says if you saw 1 at night, that is the night following the 7th day when his tumah is over, and 2 during the day, you do have to bring a carbon. He would have to bring it, because his obligation began at night. He was chayiv in the carbon already at night, and therefore he has to bring it later during the day. So you see here, Rav Yochanan is saying a similar halacha. He's saying that the tumah, the nighttime, is already a time when he started being chayev, and he has to bring the carbon as a makeup. The problem is if Rav Yochanan really holds that way, if he really holds that the nighttime is when the chayev begins, so even if he saw 2 flows, or even 3 flows all at night, he should still have to bring a makeup. Why is it only if he sees 1 flow at night? Obviously, the reason is because the fact that 1 of the 3 flows is at night is not a problem. It doesn't show that he was pater from the carbon, that he was blocked from the carbon by the tumah yet. You only say that the blocking of bringing the carbon because of the tumah begins when all 3 flows, or at least 2 flows, have hit. If there's just 1 at night, it doesn't count as anything, because that we could view as being keri until I see the other 2 flows. So you see then, therefore, that Rav Yochanan would hold that nighttime is not a time for being able to bring a karbonos. It does not count as a chiyuv karbonos. If it did, and even if somebody saw all 3 flows at night, he would still be considered someone who had a chiyuv, and he would have to make it up. It's got to be that we view it as the nighttime is not a time of chiyuv yet, and therefore, if you saw only 1 flow, it doesn't count. And now we understand that Gemara of Ziva, but it's a kasha. Well, we said it earlier because we had been assuming earlier, in order to explain the halacha by Nazir, that Rav Yochanan has to hold that the nighttime is a time of Chiyuv Karbanos. So the Gemara answers, the Gemara says, no, Rav Yochanan really holds nighttime is a time of Chiyuv Karbanos. He just said the halacha about a Zav, according to the opinion that nighttime is not a time of Chiyuv Karbanos. He said there that the halacha will be that if he sees one flow, then he's chayiv to bring, but if he sees two flows, then he's not. So the Gemara says, what would be the chiddush of that? Once you're already saying that I'm saying according to the one who holds that the chiyuv carbon does not exist yet, so then I know the rest of it is obvious. Gemara says the chiddush is what we said, that the one flow doesn't count as if the tumah started. The tumah doesn't start until you have two flows. Then retroactively we count it as being all three together, but the tumah doesn't start until the day. That's the chiddush. He's telling you that even though that someone who holds that the Chiyuv Karbanos only starts during the day, even if you had one flow at night, that doesn't count. That issue is a machlokes between Rav Shisha Bar Rav Idi and Rav Yosef in Masachas Krisos. And here where he's teaching me that halacha, that's the chiddush here. Okay, the Gemara now leaves that topic, and the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah where we had seen that if somebody missed bringing a Karban Chagiga, altogether it's called the Ma'uvas Lo Yuchol Liskon Chisaron Lo Yuchol Himanos. So the Gemara wants to know, what's this word Himanos? It is a lack that cannot be counted. It's a funny word. The Gemara says, Bar Hehe said to Hillel, it's the wrong word here. It should say Lihimolos, it's a lack that can't be filled. So the Gemara says that the word Himanos is referring to a situation where somebody counted his friend. He asked his friend to join in a group that was doing a mitzvah, and he did not join with them. That's what the pasuk Chisaron Lo Yuchol Himanos means. He was supposed to count, and he didn't count among the group. He missed the opportunity. But someone who had an opportunity, someone who did an avera that cannot be corrected, that would be called chisaron lo yuchal lehi molos. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says that clearly. It says ma'uvas lo yuchal liskon, a twist that cannot be fixed. That is somebody who did not say Kriya Shema either morning or evening. Somebody who did not say Tefillah Shema Nesrei either morning or evening. That is a chisaron. That is a chisaron lo yuchal lehi molos. Chesaron lo yichol lehimonos, that he cannot be counted, is someone who was invited to do a mitzvah and count amongst those who are doing them, and he did not do them. Now, the Gemara here has mentioned Bar Hehe, who said to Hillel. The Gemara now brings some other things that Bar Hehe said to Hillel. Tosfos points out that he's possibly called Bar Hehe because he was a ger, and therefore is considered to be the son of Avram and Sarah directly. Avram and Sarah both had a Hey added to their name, and therefore he's Bar Hehe. Tosfos says that the Chacham known as Ben Bagbag could be the same person, or also a ger, because Beis and Gimel add up to 5, to Hey, and therefore it's another way of saying Bar Hehe. So another thing that Bar Hehe said, and this is that he said to Hillel, he said, what is pshat in the pasuk that says, V'shaftim re'isim be'tzadik l'rasha bein over l'kim la'shalo avado, a pasuk in Malachi. So you will be able to see between the tzadik and the rasha, between the saint, the good person, and the wicked person, and between Oved Elokim, one who is a servant of God, Ashalo Avodo, to him who does not serve. The Gemara says, what's the difference? A tzaddik and an Oved Elokim is the same thing, and a rasha and a lo avodo is the same thing. What are we referring to over here? So he said that the reason is as follows. There's a big difference between somebody who chazered what he learned 100 times and somebody who chazered what he learned 101 times. A tzaddik could be somebody who reviewed what he learned 100 times, but he's not called an Oved Elokim. An Oved Elokim is somebody who reviewed it 100 times. He's a tzaddik, that's lo avado. So Gemara says he didn't review one additional time already, he becomes a lo avado, he didn't serve Hashem. Gemara says yes, there's a big difference with one extra time. And if you go to the market where they rent out animals for use, like donkeys, you'll see, if you would like to rent a donkey, the price is dependent on how far you intend to travel with him. If you want to travel 10 parsa, it goes for 1 zuz. You want to travel 11 parsa, twice the price, it goes up to 2 zuz. Perhaps the price is sold in increments of 10, but you see that one additional review makes a major difference. One small thing can take you from one category to a different category. Okay, now the Gemara says that Elio said to Bar Hehe, or possibly to Rabbi Elazar, what is the meaning of the words Hine Tzarafticha V'lo v'chesef b'charticha b'chor oni. I have purified you, but not in a silver furnace. I have chosen you in a smelting of poverty. So the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I chose poverty as being the best trait for Klal Yisrael to clean us up and smelt us and purify us. And Shmuel said, Pasi Rav Yosef, that's what people say, that poverty is good for the Jews, like a red strap is good for a white horse. Okay, now the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah where we had a Machokas Tanaim, what is meant by Ma'ovos L'Yuchol Liskon. So Rav Shimon ben Manasseh had said that somebody who is physically together with a person, a woman who's forbidden to him, an erva, and he gives birth to a mamzer. So the Gemara asks, without the mamzer, he made that woman forbidden to her husband because she has been involved in illicit relations, and now she's usher to her own husband, and that is also a problem that cannot be fixed. Why is it only if there's a mamzer there? So Gemara gives a couple of answers. The Gemara says possibly it's referring to a case where he was not together with a married woman, but it was a erva, it was a person who's a relative of his, like a sister, for example, who's not married, so she didn't forbid her to anybody. But if they give birth to a child, that child's a mamzer. No child, then there's no ma'ovos l'yichol liskon. He could always do tshuva for that. Another answer is both are situations where it's a married woman, but one is referring to where he performed the act be'onis, where it was against the will of the woman, and therefore she's not forbidden to her husband. On the other is where she did it willingly, and therefore he has made it forbidden, and that's would be a ma'ovos l'yichol liskon even without the birth of the mamzer. Third answer is that they're both talking about where it was ba'onis, and one is where the woman was the wife of a Kohen, because the wife of a Kohen becomes usher to him even if she was just in an illicit relationship against her will, while the wife of Yisrael is only forbidden if it was willing. And therefore, the case where it's a ma'ovos when it was without the mamzer is if it was the wife of a Kohen because she's now also to her husband. The case where it's only if there is a mamzer is if it was the wife of a Yisrael or a Levi where there is no continued Isser. The other problem could be mamzeres. Now, the Gemara brings down the Brisa, which mentions that it's a ma'ovis if one makes a woman forbidden to her husband. And the Brisa continues, and it brings other opinions and examples, such as the one we've seen in the Mishnah. So we've seen about ma'ovis could be someone who makes a woman forbidden to her husband. Rav Shimon ben Yochai says it does not say check the camel for a mum, and doesn't say check the pig for a mum. You only check sheep for a mum. That is, ma'ovis l'yichol liskon is where something was good and then became disqualified. So that's like a sheep that gets a mum and becomes disqualified. Something which started off disqualified, like a camel or a pig, you don't call that ma'ovis. So therefore he says, ma'ovis l'yichol liskon refers to a Talmid Chacham who leaves the way of Torah. Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish has an explanation that he says any Talmid Chacham who leaves the way of Torah is referred to by the pasuk that says Ketzipor nodedes min kana kein ish nodin min makomo, like a bird wandering from the nest is a man wandering from his place. It also says Ma'amatza v'seichem bi avel. Hashem says, what did your fathers find sin and wrong with me? Ki rachaku me'alai, that they have left me. Now the Gemara a bit later says Yotze ulava in shalom, the one who comes and leaves there is no peace. The Rav says that someone who leaves the world of halacha and is involved in the world of mikra, the world of psukim, he doesn't have peace because he can no longer paskin halachas. He cannot paskin halachas from psukim. Shmuel says a similar thing as someone who leaves the world of Talmud, that is Gemara, explaining the contradictions and what there is to learn about Mishnayos. For him there is no peace if he goes to the world of Mishnayos. Rav Yochanan says even somebody who goes from Shas to Shas, someone who goes from Shas Bavli to Yerushalmi or Yerushalmi to Bavli, he also will not find peace because he will not find the depth that he found in his previous experience.